Wait until the clock strikes one. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to our City Council work session here on Thursday, December 8th, 2022, at 1 p.m. here in our wonderful City Hall Council chambers. I'd like to welcome you all who have joined us in person and those of you who have joined us virtually. At this time, I'll turn to our clerk for her to call our roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor O'Neill.
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton has an excused absence. Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Holsey-Hyman also has an excused absence. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
And Councilmember Williams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you see, we have some vacancies today, and I'm just coming back today. We've had a lot of city business going on, and so we appreciate those who are out and about still doing the people's business. I think Mayor Pro Tem is actually in Israel, and I think Councilman Hyman is also out of town on city business. So we've been doing a lot of traveling these days, and you will see, I believe Councilwoman Johnson will be leaving us a little early today as she has another obligation. So we are getting the city's work done both here in City Hall and outside. And I'd like to recognize my colleagues now for any announcements that they may have. And then I'll have a couple once they are done. So I'll look to my left. Any announcements on this end? Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to request the assent of my colleagues to bring to you a resolution at our next work session in support of the LGBTQ community in response to some of the recent acts of violence and hatred that folks have suffered. There's a statewide campaign to encourage cities to pass resolutions, and I'd like to bring one to the council at our next work session.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Williams, do you have any announcements today?
I'll be happy to support that.
I would too. Everybody putting a thumbs up? Thumbs up. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Turning to my right now. Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two things. I want to thank Councilmember Johnson for making that request first. But I want to make a request of us to hear from Haiti Reborn, maybe at our next work session or the following, just to get some feedback on what's been going on. I think there's a lot of conversation in the community, and it'd be good to get that information back to us. I think that it's been circulating quite a bit, and I would just like to nail something down around that. So I'll look for support around having that come to us. And then Dr. Holsey-Hyman, who couldn't be here this afternoon, away on business, has also left us with some homework. She has requested that we review her proposal around mentorship, the National Mentoring Month in January, and due to the timing, she asked if I could bring it forward so that we could at least get a head nod or thumbs up around council's support for moving forward, as there would be an expense to host an event here in the lobby or what have you. And so just looking for support in that, and I can bring that to other matters at the end, or if however works best.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilwoman Caballero.
Yes, to the first point with the next work session, my ask is that we not have it at the next work session, the Haiti Reborn. I unfortunately have to leave early that day, and I know we have the 505 West Chapel Hill Street project, and so I'm a little anxious about the time of that meeting already.
All right, we'll ask to make sure that that's scheduled so that everybody's present when that conversation occurs. All right, I have a couple of announcements, great announcements for the city of Durham. The first, though, that I'd like to mention is earlier this morning, I was a speaker at the Durham Crisis Intervention Team's 15th annual recognition banquet. And I just wanted to give a shout out to all of those folk. For those of you who are not sure what this is that it's a CIT programs are local initiatives that are designed to improve the way law enforcement and the community respond to people experiencing mental health or substance abuse crises, right? And they build on these strong partnerships between law enforcement, mental health provider agencies, individuals, families affected by mental illness, and community resources. Our local Durham CIT program was actually established in 2007 by the Durham Center, which is now Alliance, the Durham Police Department, the Durham County Sheriff's Department, and NAMI. In 2010, we've expanded now, and they have a plethora of partners, which includes the Durham County Detention Center, NCCU, Police Department, the Duke University Police Department, Durham County Emergency Medical Services, Durham Tech Police Department, the Veterans Administration Police Department, the Department of Public Safety, Probation and Parole, NAMI Durham, Duke University Institute for Brain Science, Durham County Criminal Justice Resource Center, Durham Recovery Response Center, and Threshold Clubhouse, and more recently, a new partner is Durham Community Safety Department's HEART team. We they have trained 1,234 first responders have been trained and have graduated from the Durham CIT program. As you all know, mental health issues and substance abuse issues are rampant in all of our communities, but I wanted to mention them first and highlight their work first, because after going to Selma, Alabama over the last couple of days, which I'll get to in a second, I am very appreciative of where we are in Durham on certain issues. And this is one where we are really leading the way, and I got a chance to go by and see those folk this morning. It was a beautiful occasion, and I told them that I was going to give them a shout out today and to let you know that some people never got a break during COVID. These folk worked through COVID, and they have kept responding to crises over and over again. And I told them this morning that they are walking miracles. And I think sometimes we take for granted the kinds of things that people actually do in their day-to-day lives that really change the focus of people's lives. And this is one of those areas that is so critical right now and will continue to be. And so I just wanted for us to give them a round of applause and to thank them for all of the work that they are doing. Now, we have a couple of great announcements coming up this week. Actually, I was in Selma, Alabama for the Partnership for Equitable and Resilient Communities, which is an organization who has its mission to pretty much focus in on whatever their foundation is in racial equity. And they contacted the city through our Durham Housing Authority, and it was like almost a dream, because they're saying, you know, we have identified Durham, North Carolina, Selma, Cleveland, and St. Paul to be a part of an initial cohort of cities where they would come in for a period of 3 to 5 years with money. $2.5 million that they will give, and then we have a matching obligation of $2.5 million for a total of $5 million over the next 3 to 5 years to focus in on the mayor's initiatives. Hot dog. So I'm like, okay, is this really happening? And it is. So the initiative that we are focusing on, because it's not going to just be the mayor's initiative, this is a community effort, is in our housing arena, and particularly how to put our systems together so that our most vulnerable populations will be able to have easier access. So we're focusing in on primarily at first our justice-involved individuals who have all kinds of barriers in our housing arenas. And we will hopefully expand it at some point to include our elderly population because, believe it or not, they struggle with some of the same issues in terms of accessibilities. So our Chief of Staff, Carmisha Wallace, we were representing the city along with our partners, which is Durham Housing Authority with our CEO, Anthony Scott, and also the Institute for Economic Minority Development, which is Andrea Harris, if you all know her, is that same organization that she started. There, we are all partnering along with Justice Reborn, which is former police chiefs Steve Chalmers' initiative. So we went down to have 2 days of training on starting this initiative and really had the kickoff, and we will begin that work like now. We've started that work. So we had a great time down there. And then on tomorrow, right here in City Hall.
Recording in progress.
We will have an announcement about another partnership with the Bloomberg Harvard City Initiative. Durham is a legacy city in that our former Mayor Steve Schul was the first mayor from Durham to be a part of a city initiative that's funded by Michael Bloomberg with the help of Harvard. They identify mayors all over the world, really, to come in and work with them for about a year on the initiative. So these two initiatives are like perfect timing. They're merging together. So Harvard will be here tomorrow. We've already identified a team of 12 who will be working with them, and they will also be here tomorrow to explain more about what they will be doing. I've visited Amsterdam with them. We've been to New York. Ms. Wallace and also Amber Wade from the city. They are constantly in change. I'm surprised she's here now because she's been on with Bloomberg this morning. So we have a lot of great stuff going on in Durham. We may not be perfect, and a lot of people may not see a lot of it. A lot of that is because your mayor is an introvert. So I don't enjoy the public eye a lot. I have to do it. It's a part of what I do. But a lot of us, I've found, are introverts. So we tend to do a lot of work and not talk a lot about it. And so that's what we're aiming to do. So hopefully in another year, the Harvard Bloomberg Initiative will last for 1 year. They will also send us in a fellow. And we also have grant opportunities with them as well that we're pursuing with other partners in Durham. So I'm excited about all of this. And I celebrated my 1-year anniversary as mayor in Selma, and I couldn't think of a better place to be. That trip was one of the best trips that I've taken just for what Selma stands for, and also to understand how far we have come, but yet how far we still have to go. So Durham, you have a lot to be proud of. We're going to be coming to our community to ask you all, because we can't do this alone. No government can do the type of work that we need to do alone. And so I would ask that you all get your minds open to the possibilities of how you could help us as we endeavor to try to change the trajectory of some of the lives in our city who are not faring well. So with that being said, I think that concludes my announcements, and we will now turn to our city manager for any priority items that she may have today.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the Durham City Council. The city manager has no priorities this afternoon.
I'll now turn to our city attorney. Our city attorney is also here in City Hall, but she is taking care of some other city business. So we'll now turn to our city
Deputy City Attorney Fred Lamar, and I'm, as the mayor has stated, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the City of Durham Council. Fred Lamar in for Kim Rayberg, the city attorney. The city attorney's office has no priority items. Thank you.
Thank you. I now turn to our city clerk to see if she has any priority items.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. The City Clerk's office has no priority items today.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you all. We will now turn to the reading of our agenda today. We will first go through our consent items, and then we will go through our departmental items and presentations and public hearings. The first item on our agenda today is the approval of city council minutes. We also have number 2 is the Durham Planning Commission appointment. Item number 3, which is the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority mayoral appointment, will be referred back to staff today. Number 4, the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority appointment. Item 5 is the Human Relations Commission appointment. We now turn to our departmental items. City Manager's Office. Item 6, the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA Project Latino Credit Union Resiliency Fund. Item 7, the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA Project Eviction Assistance Fund. 8, American Rescue Plan Act ARPA Project Home and Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. Item 9, a resolution to designate a portion of North Carolina Highway 751 in Cameron Boulevard from Curley Road to Duke University Road as Coach K Highway. Item 10, the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA Project Homeowner and Home Buyer Initiated Program. Item 11, American Rescue Plan Act Project Durham Affordable Sustainable Homes.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to pull it, but I just wanted to comment on all the ARPA contracts when we get to that point.
Thank you. From the Community Development Department, item 12, contract with Housing for New Hope, Inc. for the provision of landlord engagement services. From our Public Works Department, item 13, the North Carolina Department of Public Safety Division of Emergency Management Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP-4393-0038 Grant Project Ordinance. From our Water Management Department, item 14, award of construction contract to J.F. Wilkerson Contracting Company, Inc. for the FY23 unscheduled pipeline repairs project. Item 15, the award of construction contract to Carolina Civil Works, Inc. for the FY23 unscheduled pipeline repairs project. And then we will turn to our presentations. From number 16, Councilman Williams will lead this discussion, is the GoDurham Better Bus Project update. Item 17, the Durham County Transit Plan presentation, Councilwoman Deidreana Freeman will lead that discussion. Item 18 will be led by Councilwoman Javier Caballero, which is the Development Concerns and Mitigation Steps Program, Mitigation Steps presentation. Public hearings, number 19, the Consolidated Annexation Stellar View. Number 20 is the zoning map change, 4150 Old Chapel Hill Road. 21, the Consolidated Annexation Gearing Junction. Our citizens matter should be heard next. We have Mr. Isaac Woods is item number 22, I'm sorry. All right, and so we will start first with Mr. Isaac Woods.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, staff, City Clerk. My name is Isaac Woods, and we're here to summarize the lack of fire protection and water that we've been addressing with the city for over 10 years, where Ardmore Drive was forced into the city through annexation in 1987. And we still do not have fire hydrants on all Ardmore Drive, city water, paved street. I emailed you guys this morning, but I have copies. If you would like, I could pass it out to council if it's okay with the mayor for your reference. It's just a little cheat note. I forwarded a copy to the city clerk as well, but I have a copy for everybody.
It will go to the clerk.
Thank you.
Pass those to her.
I was just informed I only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to be brief. I think I probably need about 5, but we'll try to make this as quick as possible. We're before the council because of the inequity in the process. This is not a personal attack on the city manager. It's not a personal attack on the public works director and a staff member. This is about equality on basic services. I heard the great things that the mayor is doing to say that Durham's a great city, but we're citizens since 1987 paying taxes for no services for fire protection. The house across the street burnt down. The fire chief said, hey, no fire hydrant. We're entitled to that type of service just like everybody else. And to make this even worse, the city paved and provided water, city water and fire hydrants for one end of Ardmore Drive. We're talking about the same road, the same people, same neighborhood, same taxpayers. So why do we have preferential treatment for one set of citizens on one end of Ardmore Drive, and while the citizens on the other end of Ardmore Drive, they don't have those city services? So we've been working with the city manager, the Public Works Department, and if you look at your thing, we gave you the stature. In 1987, the general stature said, once you involuntary annex in the city, these city services have to be provided within 2 years. I remember that. I was living there, all right? A report was developed. The city clerk has that. It was, Ms. Gray was the city clerk at that time. So we were told we need to do a petition, which was contrary to the law. We did the petition. We still don't have city water and street paved for all Ardmore Drive. Somewhere down the line, this deception that we do the petition was not correct. But either way, we did it. As we sit here today, some 5 years since we did the petition, in 2022, we're talking about citizens on basic functions of fire protection, drinking water, and a paved street. I've outlined some of the inequalities that happens when you don't have fire protection. You pay higher insurance premium. If you go get your homeowner's insurance, I guarantee you, if you look at the first thing they ask you on the application, where is the closest fire hydrant? Closest fire hydrant on Ardmore Drive is like 4,000 feet down the road. As the fire chief said, we can't put out fires. The fire truck only has 150 gallons of water on it. That is not enough to put out a house fire. That's why the house burnt down. Unsafe drinking water. We spend thousands of dollars buying bottled water because the wells are failing. We spend an average of $3,000 just to do water infiltration system on existing houses a year to treat the water so we can take a shower and a bath. This is all confirmed with the Durham County Health Department. Now, for this to go on in a city that's as progressive as Durham is really worse than Jackson, Mississippi. They have drinking water, they have water, we don't have no water. So we're asking the staff and the council members, because the staff say they have no priority. If you look down the list, you have a long time of paved streets that the city's done. You just have contracts on that for scheduled pipeline repair. So the council needs to direct the city manager, city staff, that this is a priority. The city say they have no policy. It's just up to them on what streets get paved and who gets city water, on what order they do it in. So we ask to end the inequality. We pay taxes, we home. Imagine if you were told to do something different, sit on a hard chair or sit on the outside without services. This is not just, this is a moral issue. When you wake up in the morning, think about it. You have taxpayers since 1987 still don't have fire protection, drinking water, and a paved street, while people on the other end have it. And Mayor O'Neill, I know as a judge, I don't have to go over the inequalities of that, because separate water and sewer on one end of the street is not equality products. We ask for your cooperation. We ask for the city director staff to have this done immediately. You see contracts on your agenda now for unscheduled pipeline repair. Altmore Drive should be on that list, as well as the paved street list. We need to develop a firm policy on how the city will assign this. We thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to answer.
Thank you so much. I think I missed hearing the beat, but, so you may have gotten a little longer than the 3 minutes, but we thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize to others. I'll try to be more cognizant about it, but I think you have Isaac Woods Jr., and you're up next, sir, and you will have 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm Isaac Woods Jr., 725 Altmore Drive resident. City Council, I would like to reiterate what came from my father and also summarize and also to highlight the international issue that is here. The UN United Nations General Assembly Resolution 64/292 says that water, sanitation is a human right. It needs to be prioritized. It's something that all humans deserve. We are being denied that right. Currently, right now, we have paid taxes. Stormwater fees have increased. We have no stormwater drainage. We've been paying these fees across the decades. This is millions of dollars that has left our pockets, including some of the other issues, as was mentioned with insurance. It feels as if things are being taken, stolen. Our funds, our money are being stolen from us and given to the rest of the city while we are neglected for essential resources like water, the ability to protect ourselves if there is a fire. We do not have that, and also sewage. Don't wait until something terrible, tragic happens, till someone has to die because of a fire, because someone has to lose their home because of this, or someone is sick because of the water. Do something now before something tragic has to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We now turn to, we have 2 presenters on the internet. Eilran Nunez, and we'll have 3 minutes, followed by Nunez. 3 minutes.
Hello, Madam Mayor and Durham City Council.
Good afternoon.
Hi, yes, I've been a longtime Durham resident and proud of the city, but unfortunately with the circumstances here at Ardmore, it is a shameful stain on the legacy of Durham, especially hearing, all the wonderful works that are in progress in our great city. As we said, we are taxpayers. We have been contributing, paying, but yet we're not granted the services as citizens of Durham. So building off what both Mr. Woods Sr. and Jr. said, that we need our services, that we need our drinking water, we need our sewage, the fire hydrants, and the continuation of the paved roads. I saw fairly recently, I know that they began paving the roads, and I was delighted, hoping that the project would continue. But as I've noticed, half of Ardmore has been developed and paved while the other hasn't. So I just humbly stand before the council and you, Madam Mayor, that you can please go through on your word and to try and prioritize this for our neighborhood. That's all.
Thank you. We now turn to Nunez. It will be, it's Nellis, Nellys, Nunez.
Mayor O'Neill, can you please ask Ms. Nunez to unmute herself?
Ms. Nunez, if you could unmute yourself, ma'am. Is she there? She is online, I think. Ms. Nunez? And I believe it may be some relation to Mr. Nunez. as they have the same address. Yes. Ma'am, you're muted. We can't hear you. All right. We will try and come back to her, and we will move on now. And I believe Councilwoman Eilran had some comments that she wants to make, and she will be leading our first discussion.
Oh, I thought I was leading go.
No, it's Leo, right, first.
Yeah.
So we'll let you do your comment first.
Thank you.
Then
I
we'll
just
turn to-
wanted to thank staff. I'm seeing these contracts come back faster and more of them, and just really excited that we're getting these dollars out into the community. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We have no pulled items today, so we will go forth with our presentations, and I will now turn it over to our colleagues to follow our agenda as outlined.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor and colleagues. We have our first presentation from our Transportation Director, Mr. Sean Egan. Director Egan is on you.
Thank you, Council Member and Madam Mayor and members of the Durham City Council. My name's Sean Egan. I'm the Director of Transportation for the City of Durham. And I want to start today by saying how grateful we are to the governing bodies of the Durham County Transit Plan for providing funding and support for the Better Bus project, support that made the work you see here possible. We also applaud that the Durham County Transit Plan has clearly prioritized investments around the needs of GoDurham bus riders, dedicating unprecedented funding for bus transit services and facilities. These investments will be transformative for our community, and we extend our gratitude to the Durham Board of County Commissioners, the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Planning Organization, DCHCMPO, and the Go Triangle Board of Trustees for their leadership and support. Over the last 2 years, we have engaged deeply and continuously with our community to ensure that we develop projects responsive to their needs. The community leaders, transit riders, and residents we worked with shared emotional accounts of how neglect of basic needs impacts their daily lives and the indignity they feel when using our transit system. Their stories ignited in me a passion to do whatever I can to bring dignity to every aspect of their transit experience. Regrettably, my passion for this work has impacted my judgment. There are statements in my memorandum to the council that I prepared while carried away by my exuberance for this work. I am aware that these statements have caused a great deal of angst. In the strongest terms that I can muster, this was not my intent. And questions that I deem to be more than reasonable have surfaced. First and foremost, it is not my place to direct the deliberations of elected officials and duly appointed policymakers. I understand that my statements more than suggest that I was doing exactly that. It is my role to dispassionately inform such deliberations, and this was my only intent. To the extent that I breached this boundary and inappropriately exposed some advocacy associated with seeking to acquire resources for something that I am excited about, I sincerely apologize. It has been my great privilege to participate in the work of planning improvements to transit in Durham over the next 20 years, with talented and dedicated professionals representing Durham County, DCHCMPO, and Go Triangle. In no way did I mean to disrespect their contributions to this work. I fully understand that this process needs to be collaborative in every way in order to find the right balance among the many valuable opportunities competing for limited resources. I want to share that I have great respect for my colleagues on the Durham Transit team engaged in this work and led by my former city transportation teammate. To my city colleagues, this angst has touched you as well. Please know that I am humbled by my shortcomings in failing to demonstrate care and respect in the conduct of this work. I apologize to you for putting your trust and hard work in jeopardy with my intemperance. I hope that you will allow me the chance to earn your trust anew. I now want to step back and introduce today's presenters, whose extraordinary efforts over the last 2 years are proof that we can take a new and different approach to transportation planning, one that actively engages residents and empowers them to make decisions, provides real opportunities for residents to impact project design, ensures transparency throughout the planning and decision-making processes, and as a result, builds community trust. I am joined today by Assistant Transportation Director Eilran Patterson, Community Partner Angel Dozier of Be Connected Durham, and Consultant Project Manager Greg Sauer of WSP for this update on the Better Bus Project.
Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Again, my name is Eilran Patterson, Assistant Director in the Transportation Department. We're delighted to present to you the update on the GoDurham Better Bus Project, a community-focused approach to improving the quality of life for residents and users on our local bus system. The Better Bus Project was made possible through partnership with a host of government and community stakeholders, including Durham County, Go Triangle, and city partner departments like Public Works. But I'd like to make special mention of our partnership with that transportation made with the Neighborhood Improvement Services that guided us through the equitable community engagement process and their community partner program, which we'll elaborate more on. I also wanted to thank community stakeholders like North Carolina Central University and Hayti, providing insights and space throughout the engagement process. The GoDurham Bus Project, Better Bus Project, took a comprehensive look at improving the local bus system for GoDurham riders and residents. And I wish I had time to go through all of the components, but the project consists of 6 tasks as listed here that focus on removing barriers to transit for bus riders and their access to transit services. So you can see on the map here, the access to transit map shows the system-wide analysis of the GoDurham services, highlighting bus stops, Central Durham Bus Station, and the transit emphasis corridors, which we'll speak more about in this presentation. It's important for us to touch on why there's a focus on improving transit services locally and regionally. Transit improves the quality of life for Durham residents and riders for many of the reasons as you can see on your screen. But most importantly, access to transit is yet a touch point that improves vitality in local communities, that which we consistently heard throughout our engagement. The Better Bus Project has 3 goals, in which we say every bus trip has 3 phases. Your trip to the bus, your bus stop, and your bus ride. All 3 phases are required for a quality ride in the GoDurham system. In applying this lens, the project took a hard look at existing barriers for riders in the system and found examples as shown here, including trash blocking access to bus stops, disconnects in sidewalks or curb ramps, locations with no bus pads, benches, or shelter. So we asked the community to tell us everything about making their transit experience better and what they like to see, what they think are the particular barriers in their communities. As Sean mentioned, the Transportation Department sought to change its practices and approaches to the planning process and public engagement efforts, with more focus on building relationships and trust with communities that have been historically left out of the government process. So Transportation and NIS work together to develop alliances with the community and bring the project to the public through the Community Partner Program. This, a city investment in acknowledging the efforts of remarkable community leaders and members who are working tirelessly to lend voice to residents and to advocate for the change they want to see in their community. And I want to give a special shout out to the community partners as listed here, who have really helped us in bringing institutional knowledge and context to the planning process. Working with community partners allowed this project to reshape how we typically engage and develop planning recommendations. Through our participating in their hosted community events, bus tours, community conversations, and joyous occasions with artists and youth, allowed the project to hear more and gather input on the type of improvements to the transit that they want to see in their community. We spoke of imagining quality transit corridors like the Hayti Eagle Line or the Village Transit Center line that celebrates the history of the community and brings character to these vital arteries. It connects residents, students, and riders to jobs, shops, and restaurants along Fayetteville Street, Holloway Street, and to downtown. We heard from partners and riders that in addition to better bus stops, they want to see safer and improved walk paths to locations, less people suffering fatalities, more shelters, benches, and lighting, and all these things to make their experience better in their community. I do want to take this moment now to invite Ms. Angel Dozer, Isette Dozer from Be Connected Durham, to tell about her experience as a community partner.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and esteemed City of Durham Council. It is my pleasure to be here to speak on behalf of the Better Bus Project today. My name is Angel Isette Dozier. The Better Bus Project has served as evidence of Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, wherein she says, what we do at the small scale sets the tone for the whole system, or the large scale. It means we must work together at the root of a problem, at the speed of trust, to solve it. It is not romantic work. A critical acknowledgement for the Better Bus Project is that the consultants, the Department of Transportation, and the technical staff and engineers have accomplished the very difficult goal to move at the speed of trust, particularly as generations of Durham citizens have lived lives that have been pushed to the margins, or ones rife with constant displacement and with no secure sense of belonging, resulting in the following: a systemic lack of socioeconomic, emotional, mental, and spiritual mobility, a systemic barrier to a restorative and healing justice ethos, and a systemic resistance to the essential components of equity, shared power, unity, and for progress. This is why hundreds of Durham citizens work together with the Neighborhood Improvement Services Department to establish the Equitable Engagement Blueprint under the tutelage of former Mayor Steve Schewel in 2018. There are only a handful of cities, and I think we heard some of them earlier, across the country who have adopted such a community benefit agreement, and only a handful of City of Durham agencies right here who abide by the Equitable Engagement Blueprint. The Department of Transportation, through the Better Bus Project, is one of those agencies and has proven through record survey responses by Black and brown people that the city is indeed a forward-thinking and progressive place to be because of the creative genius of our neighbors who find ways to thrive and engage even when access to information or opportunity is limited. These barriers still leave gaps, however, gaps in information, access, opportunity, and they require community-rooted imagination and innovation, where historically, our society has suffered crisis of imagination and innovation. It takes time, and it takes resources. We're talking about equitable time and equitable resources to undo what has been done to Black and brown citizens in the city of Durham for more than 60 years. The results, when moving at the speed of trust, speak volumes. The results also speak for themselves. We were able to achieve a 72% rate of Black and brown folk, people of color, to answer a survey within the city of Durham, and it is a first. If you look at the numbers for the comprehensive plans and the other things in the past, you don't see that many responses. It is my hope that the city of Durham honors itself in both word and in deed with regards to being a national model for change, rather than the tried, true self-saboteur, quick, fast, and in a hurry. This trope has only resulted in grave societal dis-ease, insurmountable social tension, and the constant question, why is there so much crime and violence? Better is essential for best. We have everything we need to be and to do better. So let us please keep doing and being better. Thank you.
Oops. Hello, I'm Greg Sauer. I'm with WSP, and I've been able to serve as the project manager for this project. I wanted to take you through some of the improvements that we'll be looking at, focusing on the transit emphasis corridors, Fayetteville and Holloway. To echo what Angel said, we have made such incredible inroads in establishing trust. We went out and we asked the community, please identify the barriers for you to use transit. And they told us those barriers, and now it's up to us to remove them. We need to hold our promises to remove those barriers and make sure everybody can use transit within the city. If you look to the left, you'll see there's a number of improvements, other ways that we can overcome some of these barriers. We can add pedestrian crossings. We can even tighten up turn radii so vehicles coming off of driveways aren't going as fast. We can certainly look at adding benches, shelters, other improvements like that for those who are specifically using transit. But do note that these are all very small individual projects, but when put together provides a corridor-wide and a comprehensive improvement package that is going to be beneficial for all users. You don't have to be using transit to appreciate there's a sidewalk. These are easy things. So now I'd like to take you to a 4-block section of Fayetteville Street at Linwood, just to show you the magnitude of the type of improvements we're looking at. So the top box, what you're seeing, this is a 4-block section. Again, there are 38 white boxes which indicate a barrier that was identified by the community and a solution for us to do an improvement. This is only 4 blocks of the entire corridor of Fayetteville and Holloway, so there's lots of improvement to do. If you look at the bottom, you see some pretty amazing statistics about the types of improvements we're doing. Again, we're not coming in and just fixing one piece of curb and gutter. We're looking at this entire section and figuring out how can we make this a comprehensive area where transit can be appreciated and individuals can use it to get around. Here's some aspirational photos of the types of improvements we could see along these corridors. I always like to highlight the Glenview Station ribbon cutting because I think it's a wonderful show of what some of the new improvements the City of Durham can do looks like, but we can even go better. We can add a little bit more to that, make it more like Evian said, a community-focused station or a stop that has some heritage to the area and ties into what's going on. How great would it be, to see a station like Glenview along the entire corridor of Fayetteville or Holloway, not looking at how do we assess amenities based on ridership or otherwise, but saying we value all riders on this corridor and we're going to treat them equally. Unfortunately, in having conversations with the community, I've heard back that there's only an expectation of the bare minimum. And that's something, speaking to what Angel and others have said, is something we need to overcome, and hopefully this is a project that will allow us to do that. So if we only as a community do the minimum, we'll be looking at 5 improvements in that area. That's 33 barriers that would still remain to accessing transit, to utilizing transit, to improve your quality of life. Now, we advocate any transit improvement, so I don't want to pass judgment against that, but we can do better. We have to do better. This is the bus stop that has been developed with the community, and that's why it's called Your Bus Stop. It's not our bus stop, it's Your Bus Stop, the community. Has lots of new enhancements that address ADA inadequacies, provide shelter for those waiting, even lean rails. One of the more interesting things we heard is, my aunt has bad knees and she can't sit down at the bench. Okay, that's something I've never heard before, but that's a lean rail. That's another thing that we were able to elicit from the community and talking with them. So very emblematic of how we can make improvements. If you saw one of these stops, the bright colors, other things like that along the way, maybe there's some branding on the side for Hayti community, maybe there's, at Central there's branding, whatever it is, but we see this as an opportunity to make place as well as transportation. So here's the existing stop at Linwood that we were looking at earlier, and this is basically what the minimum bus stop improvement would be, which is unfortunately only at a couple locations along Fayetteville Street today. So our premium that we have out there today is what we would honestly think of as the minimum. So, we really want to take this up and go to the next level and provide that character and that continuity throughout the corridor to show that we have a true cohesive vision. I'm going to show you just a short 3-block section out on Holloway near Junction Road. And I do want to point out that this is a very dangerous area for pedestrians. A lot of you probably are familiar with this. And so we have real neat opportunity to utilize transit improvements to improve quality for everybody. So we have shown on the very right side, adding some high visibility crosswalks that would allow safe crossing of Holloway. Again, everybody, all members of the community would benefit from something like that, and we're able to utilize that through transit funding. Got, let's see, how many do we have here? 13 improvements. Again, we could do just the minimum, and we'd be looking at 3 improvements, but you'd be looking in the bottom of all the other aspects that we'd be missing. How do you get to your bus, right? Waiting at your bus stop, we'd like to have more than the minimum improvements, and then how do you ride your bus? What are the ways that we can improve that as well? Looking at all aspects, of the travel for a transit user. Oops, excuse me. And at this point, I just wanted to note that, and I think that the trust and the promise is really important. I had a very, very deep connection to transit. My first job was as a paratransit driver at NC State University. Might have clipped a few windows on my cutaway van along the way, but I had made a promise to other fellow students to help them get from their place of residence to class to recreation activities off campus. It was an amazing experience and really drove home how important transit and an opportunity to move throughout the world is. And since then, I've really invested in what are the ways that I can help communities do something similar. The staff that you have is amazing, and it's been really wonderful to work with them and maybe push the edge of how excited we are. But in seriousness, this is a great project. The community involvement has been second to none, both for this type of work and what it sounds like for the city of Durham in general. And I really applaud the work and you guys listening to this presentation.
All right, so in conclusion, significant resources will be needed to deliver on these recommendations. As I shared earlier, we're grateful to the Durham County Transit Plan for nearly $5 million in awards to date for these 2 projects, which takes the combined project totals from 29 to 24 million. A $3 million contribution from city sources brings the remaining funding need to the $21 million target. We will make the best use of every dollar that our partners are able to contribute to this work. The closer we can get to that target, the more barriers we can remove, bringing dignity to the experience of transit riders in Durham. With that, you can find more information at our website, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Director Egan and staff and resident, Ms. Angel. Kind Colleagues, questions, discussion?
I don't really have a question. I just want to commend Mr. Egan and Ms. Angel and both other presenters, Mr. Patterson, for all of your hard work. And so, you know, we're all human, so everybody's allowed to err. To err is human. So I accept your sincere apologies, but that's gone now. We move forward, and we'll leave it at that. No more apologies for that, okay? We move forward. Thank you all. I do want to at least acknowledge that at least two of us have been talking about, Councilwoman Caballero and I have been having some discussions about the fact that we believe that we're going to have to float a bond at some point to address some of these issues. We are we're not a poor city, but we are by no means a rich city, and we are a growing city. And because of that, we not only have to maintain, but we also have to expand. And as you know, as your city, we only have a couple of ways that we can finance things. And we cannot, at the rate that we're going, finance what we really need to have. And just to bring it home for me, I always kind of think about, as a Durham, having lived nowhere else, what actually is going on where I grew up. So I grew up right on Moorhead Avenue, and there are 4 bus stops there in one block area. One that I used to catch as a child to school. One has a bench, one has a covering, and the one that I caught, I used to stand at, both of those, they still remain the same. They are still a pole and a sign. So you've had some improvements. We've had some, but definitely not enough. And that's a money issue. So I want to say that we will not be able to wait too much longer. And we realize that the county has just passed a bond, but we all want safe sidewalks, and we definitely want our bus riders to have safe accommodations. And we owe everybody that, as all residents of Durham. So think about it, be prepared for it. I did meet with a community group who actually came to the office hours saying, we're ready, we recognize that we need to do this. So it's gotta happen, and it needs to happen soon.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just wanted to respond to the mayor quickly, and then I have some follow-up questions. I wanted to thank Manager Page, who will be bringing the discussion around a bond to our budget retreat. I share that with the community and residents at large to pay attention, and I just want to thank her because she's been doing some pretty intense deep dives with me to have a better understanding, so I look forward to that conversation in the spring in what sounds like a sci-fi year of 2023. But I do have some questions for the presentation, Sean. Thank you so much. I know a decent amount about the Better Bus Project, but I just wanted to have, partly just so that it's out in the public and there's some, this is the opportunity to do it. When I go back to one of the first slides and it just kind of lists out the major areas of focus, and the 2 main emphasis corridors are, the Fayetteville Street and the Holloway Street, and then Durham Station. Durham Station, we were able to fund a big portion of that because of the excellent, wonderful RAISE grant that we got, and I really want to congratulate your staff because that was a big win. And I also know that the Holloway Street was another RAISE grant that we put forward, but that one we unfortunately did not win. Is your intent to put that Holloway Street corridor back out for a RAISE grant?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Caballero. So we did apply for the Holloway Corridor Safe Streets for Transit project in the RAISE 2022 cycle. Our application was not selected, but we did a debrief with the U.S. Department of Transportation and got very positive feedback about the application that we can use to strengthen it for the next round. So the notice of funding opportunity was released by the federal government at the end of November, and we're working hard to update our application, include all of the progress that we've made since we applied earlier in 2022, and get that submitted in February of 2023.
Thank you. That's exciting news, and fingers crossed that we get it. I know that that section is an extremely dangerous corridor. We've had a lot of discussion around that. And then I guess my other question is, these are all kind of in response to what we heard from community. At a certain point, and I know you all are deep in the weeds, but when can we think about what are, let's say we get all the funding, right? We have these beautiful bus, I'm looking at the sketch or the design, it's incredible. I can see why folks really want that kind of A-plus bus stop. In y'all's estimation, what would be like the next rounds of corridors?
So we've been working with our partners on the Durham County Transit Plan and looking at future corridors. The first 3 corridors that were identified through the 2017 Durham County Transit Plan were Holloway, Fayetteville, and Chapel Hill Road. If you go to Chapel Hill Road at the corner of Moorhead right now on the west side, you'll see a brand new sidewalk that is funded by the Durham County Transit Plan. So that is the Route 10 corridor. It's one of our highest ridership corridors, and we're already getting to work on that segment of the corridor, and we're looking at at future improvements all the way to the South Square area. We've also identified through community engagement that we really need to be looking north, looking at the Route 9 corridor through Bragtown and the Route 4 corridor up North Roxborough. So both of those have been identified as future corridors for improvement, and our hope is that we can develop a successful delivery model for Fayetteville and Holloway, and then apply that model on other corridors across our network.
Thank you. I really appreciate that information, and I will continue as one of the council liaisons to the MPO to push for funding, and appreciate our county colleagues. And we will be, this is part of the job. Transit's incredibly important, and we know that we need to improve our connectivity to transit and our transit system.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Just a quick question about the presentation and then some comments. But the photos that are included for the transit, I guess for the bus stop locations, are those all in Durham? Are those Durham locations?
So some of them are on slide 12, for example, are
specifically
aspirational from other cities. So one of them is from Charlotte, one of them is from Raleigh. So on that slide, we do, one is from Chapel Hill, or 2 are from Chapel Hill, but the rest of the photos are all taken of stops in Durham.
If you could go to slide 6, that would be helpful. So all of those photos are here in Durham.
That's correct.
And so I just wanted to thank you for the statement, but I do want to just push back a little bit and say I appreciate those statements being made, and just acknowledging that when you see kind of the injustice and the harm or the kind of neglect that's in our own city, it's hard to not be passionate and want to push as hard as possible. And so I do want to just offer that word and saying, I heard you, I appreciate it. The statement, of course, wording can be different, but I think that the message has to be received by us as a council, and I think that I want to thank you for that. So that's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Thank you for the presentation. This is really great. Looking at some of these examples from other cities, I'm like, green with envy. Like, we need to make this happen here in Durham. And I just wanted to, say this is a big priority for me. I think it's a big priority for all of us. This is a big price tag, but I would, I support doing what we need to do to get there. a bond, we continue to talk about bonds for green and equitable infrastructure. If there are, other federal grants, other places where we can get city money to contribute, I will support what is needed to make this project happen. And yeah, this is a game changer, right, for the community, like providing access to better transit. It benefits, it benefits everyone. It benefits the people who are riding, but it also benefits, just everyone in the community, because there's fewer people in cars, and, we're moving towards a more sustainable future. So yeah, just wanted to express this as a high priority for me, and I'll support doing what we need to do to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Any other comments? All right, I'll close with a few comments, and thank you for your initial statement. I understand the context behind it. I can really appreciate the apology. I can appreciate the passion. I think they were both necessary, though. In regards to the board meeting that I was on before I got here, was on the board meeting call with the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And I am happy to say that I advocated for, which we do have pull at the General Assembly, advocated for municipalities diversifying how they collect sources of revenue for purposes of more, just being able to fund more infrastructure. I can also appreciate the comments, the conversations we've been having around the idea of a bond on infrastructure. And I want this conversation to really be, projected out there for the folks that are constantly emailing and tweeting and calling about safe streets. As the public can see now, affordable housing is not the only tough issue in Durham. And we have one way to generate revenue to pay for all of this. And when half of your city is saying, don't raise my taxes, and the other half is saying, I'm tired of almost getting hit by a car, we have some things on our hands here. This is game changer. And Director Egan and Assistant Director Patterson, we all stood out at Junction Road with Congressman Price, and we nearly got hit. So I can appreciate you all being very hands-on with this with your staff. Saving your life, that's an invaluable act. We need to do what we must do. So I can appreciate my colleagues' comments and the nod to commitment to addressing this. And hopefully when we take our policy requests to the General Assembly with the League of Municipalities, that this is one of the things that they would be attracted to. And I would, ask my colleagues, not formally now, but ask you all to, when we start talking about our policy requests, that we join the League in trying to, just seek more resources for infrastructure. Not only was it about generating resources, it was generating sources of revenue, it was also about getting more state support around infrastructure and housing. So thank you, colleagues. Madam Manager, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. I want to appreciate the staff and the community members and the consultants, the Neighborhood Improvement Services and Transportation Department for this past couple of years, engaging our community, hearing voices, looking at needs, gaps in investment in some of the most important communities that we have in this city. It is our responsibility as administrators to work together to discover and create the resources that are needed to build and rebuild our city. And we do that through partnerships. I am extremely excited to talk about an infrastructure bond, to have you be briefed on some of the BIL possibilities that we have. We are going to be bringing projects in green and equitable infrastructure that you talked to us about 2 years ago. We have funding already built up for those investments. And some of the priorities that we have are showing up in a lot of these revenue sources. So we may not be as far away from some of these very, very important improvements than it really looks. Even though the checkbook might need to be big, there are multiple sources that we're looking at and multiple partnerships that we're going to work on in order for some of these improvements, generationally needed improvements to come into existence. So I could not leave this presentation without thanking staff, as well as looking forward to how we're going to open our eyes and see some of these investments that we have all envisioned. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Manager. We want to keep Durham dirty, but not like this, so we will change it. We will make a change. I'll pass the mic on to my next colleague.
Thank you. And I believe we're moving to the next item, which is the Durham County, just making sure. Durham County Transit Plan presentation, and we have 15 minutes for this item, and our research person is Sean Egan.
Thank you. So I'll introduce Ellen Beckman, from Transportation Manager from Durham County, as well as Eilran Kane from the DCHC MPO, and they'll be providing today's presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ellen Beckman, Durham County Transportation Manager. Eilran Kane and I are excited to be here to present our final recommended Durham County Transit Plan. So I've been working very closely with Eilran over the last 2 years since I've been in this role. He was the MPO's planning manager, and we've been kind of co-managing this study. But at this point, Eilran has recently taken a new position at the city county planning staff. So he's in a new role, but it's agreed to do this last presentation together. And just want to acknowledge his partnership and work in managing this big Durham County Transit Plan over the last 2 years. We also have had a consultant team led by Kimberly Horn and using several sub-consultants, including Nelson Nygaard and Idealism's a local firm for public engagement. So the presentation, okay. So the font gets messed up. I apologize. This is like weird font, but we'll roll with it. So this is our transit plan presentation. The adopting agencies for the transit plan, as determined by state law, are the DCHC MPO Board, the Go Triangle Board, and the Durham County Board of Commissioners. So the intention is to develop a plan that's adopted by all three boards. But throughout the process, we've been partnering very closely with the City of Durham, running the GoDurham bus system. The city has been critical partners throughout the plan's development process. But transit certainly requires partnerships, and we're talking about sustained commitments and large amounts of funding. So this truly has been a partnership and cooperative effort throughout the last couple years. So the Durham County Transit Plan is the investment plan for public transit in the county. It is required by the state law that allowed us to levy the half-cent sales tax back in 2011. It determines how we spend that money for the benefit of public transit in Durham. So this plan update covers the next 20 years or so through 2040. It is specific to those revenue sources. So the half-cent sales tax is the primary one, but there's 3 other revenue sources involved in the plan. There's a $7 county vehicle registration fee, a $3 registration fee levied by Go Triangle, and then there's a portion of the vehicle rental tax that the Go Triangle Board allocates to the Durham Transit Plan. So we first approved a Durham Transit Plan in 2011, and then we approved it again in 2017. As you all know, the Durham Orange Light Rail project was a major element of both of those plans, and it was discontinued in 2019. So that is what initiated this plan update. We've been working on it since then, going through a very deliberate process outlined on this slide. We started in 2019 with a goals and objectives phase that was done in coordination with the Durham Comprehensive Plan at that time. Then we moved into an analysis of existing conditions of our bus system, both GoDurham and GoTriangle. We looked at we then developed a series of options for how we could spend the money. That occurred around 2021. We then developed a recommended plan earlier this year. So at each of those steps, we integrated public outreach and public feedback. We had 3 main outreach efforts coordinated with those steps. We utilized the equitable engagement blueprint kind of as the basis for how we did that. Our engagement effort included using community partners to seek out responses and survey responses. It was a very successful effort. We got a lot of feedback from transit riders. Previous versions of this presentation went through that feedback that we got in detail. Today, I don't go into a lot of detail on that, but where we are is certainly an outcome of that process that we carried out over the last several years. So today is the presentation of the final plan, and then the schedule is to approve that by the 3 boards early next year. So transportation, we have a lot of plans, a lot of studies, a lot of projects. I know it's very confusing. We have a lot of boards that approve different things. So the Durham County Transit Plan is really the high-level plan that guides those specific revenue sources that I mentioned. It is funding several elements, including the commuter rail feasibility study, which is wrapping up. The GoTriangle plans to do public engagement on the results of that early next year and bring forward a regional decision-making process for if and how to move forward. The Go Durham Better Bus project that you received that presentation earlier, is a funded project through the Durham Transit Plan consisting of several sub-projects. We have also an ongoing major effort to improve all bus stops in Durham. So that's an element of our plan. We've committed to that, and our plan accommodates that long-term effort over the next several years. GoTriangle is mostly leading that and developing those bus stop improvements. And then lastly, the Durham Bus Plan is going to be following our adoption of this plan. It goes into more details about the specific routes and schedules for the operating improvements that are funded through the plan. So the Durham Transit Plan, specific to those funding sources, I do want to emphasize that the origination of this sales tax was designed to leverage federal funding programs for transit investments. So big projects, it is an opportunity and a good resource in order to leverage those competitive federal funding sources to do some of the bigger projects. But there's other ways to fund transit projects. There's federal, state funding that goes through the MPO. The City of Durham has funding. It's great to hear the interest in the infrastructure bond. That could go a long way towards needed improvements in Durham. And then GoTriangle also has some funding sources that can go towards transportation projects. So together, this plan and all of those other transportation and transit projects and plans work together to develop the future of transportation in Durham. This plan, over the next 20 years, we have a funding financial model that's used to model the revenues and the expenditures. The revenues total and the projects that are funded through the plan total more than $1 billion. To date, we've spent about $173 million since 2011. A large amount of that money was for the Durham Orange Light Rail project. But there are also continuing services that have been funded through the plan that are on the streets today and will continue to be provided through 2040. About half of the $1 billion is for those kind of already committed to and continuing projects, and then half is available for new projects. And with that, I will turn it over to Eilran, who will go into some of the details of the elements of our plan, and then I'll be back after his part.
Thank you, Ellen, much appreciated. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the recommended transit plan that's going to be brought forth to the three parties that will adopt it, we've basically put all of the projects into what we're calling 4 buckets, 4 themes here. First is to, and I'm sorry, the fonts are a little messed up, so you can't necessarily see everything on here, but first is improving the current system. We did want to make sure, and we heard very much so through our public engagement process, that we wanted to make sure we were focusing on improving the existing system that we have through GoDurham and GoTriangle for our current transit riders. So we wanted to provide more buses, more service at 15-minute intervals rather than at 30-minute intervals. We wanted to have longer hours on the evenings and weekends. And also, one thing we heard loud and clear was a more cross-town service, so that if you need to get from one part of town to another, you didn't necessarily always have to change at Durham Station. The second is getting more projects done sooner. Now that we don't have the major capital expense of Durham Orange Light Rail, could we look to refocus our funding to get some of these projects on the ground faster? This would be improvements to our paratransit service, the GoDurham Connect, a microtransit service that would be a new service, as well as we've talked about already before, bus stop improvements and seeing how much faster we can get those on the ground. Not only do we need to look within Durham, we also need to look regionally. We want to be able to bring people in from other parts of the region into Durham to our good, high-quality jobs. We also want to be able to have our Durham residents be able to cast their net as wide as possible throughout the region for good quality jobs. So we wanted to make sure we were not just connecting within Durham, but within the Triangle region as a whole. So we want to look at what are the next steps for regional service, connecting Durham to the rest of the Triangle. Also, capital improvements, things that we can do within the street network to improve the on-time performance of our current buses, as well as other smaller projects that are not as capital intensive, like transit signal priority. Finally, we want to have a better experience at our stops and stations. So not just the bus stop improvements that you've heard before, but safer access to bus stops, like the Better project would provide, as well as new transit centers in North Durham and East Durham for those who are needing to wait or transfer to a bus. So when we look at those 4 themes, we basically developed 6 kind of buckets, 6 different types of projects that we can divide the transit plan into. Those are to enhance and extend bus service, the commuter rail, which we're talking about in terms of commuter rail or other regional, major regional investment to be able to connect throughout the region. Bus stop improvements in transit centers, more routes going more places. This would include things like cross-town service, faster, more reliable service. That was that transit signal prioritization I mentioned earlier, as well as some capital improvements that we can make to our streets to help the buses run on time and be more reliable, as well as paratransit improvements. We don't recommend specific paratransit improvements at this time through the plan. We do have funding set aside for them and funding for a study to look more fine-grained, more closely at our paratransit services and see what exactly the improvements need to be, but we do provide the funding for those eventual improvements. So this chart shows basically the breakdown, split of all of those different types of improvements. For 36%, as you can see, more than a third of the funding going to enhancing and extending our existing bus service. 27%, the next largest group, is for commuter rail or other regional services. And then you can see the rest breakdown below. You can also notice 2 other ones that weren't in that in the previous slide. The first one, administration and accountability. This is a lot of what we're already doing. It does take staff time and effort to administer these projects, manage budgets and so forth, but we also want to focus on contracting accountability, making sure that we have an equitable contracting system and tracking that so that we could better report our success and our improvements to the public. And then finally, operations and maintenance. Again, that is just, we just need to make sure we have enough budget to maintain our buses, maintain our stops, and so forth. One key thing to point out is a difference between the current 2017 Durham Transit Plan and what is proposed in the new 2022 Transit Plan is kind of the flip between what we're providing for buses and what we're providing for rail systems. So as you can see in 2017, 85% was scheduled to go to light rail or commuter rail projects and only 15% to buses. So you can see we've kind of flipped that around, and about 3/4 of the funding over the next 18 years is programmed to go to bus projects. So these next few slides basically give a breakdown of some of the more specifics on each of those types of improvements that I talked about before. As you can see from this list, and I won't go through all of them for the purposes of time, but as you can see from this list, a lot of those new enhancements are happening in North Durham on Route 4 and Route 9. The connections between Durham and Chapel Hill on the Go Triangle 400 and 405, as well as additional frequency on the Route 3. We are also looking to extend weekend and weekday service all the way to midnight on all of the Go Durham routes. Again, commuter rail, I'm not going to get into much detail on this time because that's still something that's being studied and worked out and discussed. But we are in those discussions, just want to acknowledge that it could be commuter rail or it could be some other type of major investment in regional services. Bus stop improvements in transit centers, the main things here, it was already talked about, Sean and Evian brought up the Village Transit Center as part of the Better Bus Project. Also funding for a transit center in North Duke Crossing in North Durham, as well as funding for a new regional transit center that would be closer to I-40 to make those transfers easier and improve on-time performance of our Go Triangle bus system. More routes going more places. As I mentioned before, we had heard through our public engagement that people didn't want to always have to transfer downtown. So we have instituted 2 new crosstown routes. One would go from Glenview Station across North Durham and then down straight directly to the Duke VA Hospital area, so people in North Durham have an opportunity to get directly to Duke without having to go through downtown. Saving time and saving effort. Finally, a crosstown route from East Durham, basically the Village Transit Center that is planned directly to NCCU, again, without having to go downtown. But also just wanted to point out a couple of other things that I mentioned before. The micro transit service that has actually gotten off the ground. Congratulations to the Transportation Department for getting that going. Allowing people in our farther out and lesser densely developed areas where it's cost prohibitive to run fixed route service, but giving them an opportunity to be able to connect to our service or get to places within these zones. That has been a great service that's been launched, as well as an extension of the Chapel Hill Route D. This is in partnership, again, with Chapel Hill Transit, so that we're thinking a little more outside the box. This would have a Chapel Hill Transit route extend up to Patterson Place, and allow people living in Chapel Hill to get to shopping opportunities in Durham, and allow those folks who live around Patterson Place in Durham to get to job opportunities in Chapel Hill. Administration and accountability, these are a lot of the things that we're doing already. I do want to point out 2 things. One, I already mentioned, the equitable contracting. We want to make sure that we are putting forth a better effort to make sure and track where our contracting dollars are going. And then finally, just to mention the transit governance study that's been taking place and has been presented to the MPO and the Go Triangle boards. There is funding set aside for the recommendations that come out of that study as well. faster, more reliable bus service. This could be what we call bus rapid transit, but it could be other smaller infrastructure improvements on our roadways to allow our buses to turn where they maybe can't turn right now, give them transit signal priority so they're not waiting at lights and so forth. Also funding for what we call in the Durham Station Transit Emphasis Zone, looking at ways that we can improve our system downtown so that our buses are not caught either trying to get into Durham Station or trying to get out of Durham Station. Operations and maintenance, this is something that we, obviously is a need for a continuing expense. I do want to point out that the Transportation Department has done a great job of moving our fleet to a more sustainable electric bus fleet rather than depending on diesel. So just wanted to point that out and give kudos to that. And then finally, as I mentioned before, paratransit improvements. Again, we don't have specific recommendations within the transit plan at this time, but we do fund a study for looking at what those recommendations should be and then have a pot of money set aside to do those improvements once determined. And then this is, it's a lot to see on this screen, but hopefully you can look at it a little bit when you have greater time. This is a map showing all of the improvements that we're looking to do for the transit plan through 2040. I mentioned that we have the set of improvements through 2040. These are a list of the projects that we have set aside and budgeted to be done by 2027. And one I want to focus on is that these are pretty much all bus service improvements and mostly improvements for our current riders. So I just want to make that clear that we heard that through the community engagement process, that we need to be helping out our current riders, our existing bus riders, helping them out first, making those improvements first, and then we'll look to see how we can expand the system. And with that, I will turn it over to Ellen to finish up.
Thank you. The slides, there's still some more slides. You can pull that up. Okay, thanks. So this transit plan requires a financial plan be used as the basis for it. We have a financial model that Go Triangle has developed and runs as the tax district administrator. Earlier this year, we met to review that financial model and came up with some parameters that we all agreed upon to make sure that we will be able to deliver the projects, that are proposed here, and that it was financially sound and used, adequate and prudent revenue projections. So this is, we have modeled all these projects and it meets those parameters here. So this shows our fund balance over the life of the plan. Community trust is one of the core principles of our transit plan, and with that, we are going to be setting up a new framework for cooperation and monitoring implementation. We're committing to improving the accountability and the visibility of the funding and the implementation of projects. So the transit plan will include implementation metrics. The plan will include some of those example implementation metrics. We expect that they will evolve and change over time, and we'll, initiate a conversation with all of our partners on that to confirm those. But we do want to have implementation metrics and then a tracking system where we can report on what we've implemented over time, both for the governing boards and for the public as a whole. So, as the agency, most, directly responsible for levying the tax, Durham County is really committed to accountability and transparency here, and that we want to make sure that we stay focused on delivering the plan as a whole over the life of the plan, both the short-term needs and the long-term needs. So what is next? We are adopting right now our transit plan governance study implementation agreement. So that is the ILA that is approved by the 3 boards that approve this plan. So again, the county, the MPO, and the Go Triangle board. And it sets forth the kind of framework by which we work together long-term to implement the projects. We have a staff working group identified that makes recommendations on that. The new governance ILA adds the city as a member of that staff working group. And the new ILA also adds Durham County as an approving agency for the annual budget. So there's some recommendations in that governance ILA that really expand the cooperation and the local kind of input to this whole transit plan and the implementation efforts. So that is going forward for approval. It's already been approved by the county. It needs to be approved by the MPO and the Go Triangle Board. We are presenting this plan to all of those boards. This is the last one, so we've already presented it to the other 3 boards. We are working right now on finalizing all of the report. It's a pretty lengthy report, goes into a lot of detail about all of these individual projects, hoping to get that out next week. It'll be open for a minimum 28-day or a minimum 21-day public comment period for the MPO, but we're going to extend that because it is over the holidays, so we're going to do at least 28 days. And we're going to have a public hearing at the Board of Commissioners meeting January 9th, and then we hope that the plan will be approved by all 3 boards in January and February. This is the outline of what is going to be in that report, and we'll have an executive summary, and with that, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Ellen Beckman. And Aaron, I'm excited for you in your new role. King, thank you. And colleagues, Mayor O'Neill, and I see Councilmember Williams, and
I just want to take this opportunity publicly to tell Ms. Beckman, thank you so much. We have met many times. Transportation is one of these kind of areas that is very layered and very complex. And there's probably a learning curve of about 5 years, but unfortunately, when you hit the seat, you get about 3 months before you actually have to start doing some things to implement. And we have tough conversations, but they should be tough. I think we keep each other honest. I can definitely say that everybody that I have worked with in this space, they have great hearts for this work. They have passion for this work, and they are willing to challenge us. And so I just want to tell you that I appreciate all that you have done and that you continue to do to be forward thinking. Most of us can't even think about a budget for a household over 2 months, and here you are talking about going on a plan for 40 that goes out to 2040. So I have to publicly tell you thank you for all of that. Also to Mr. Egan, also to Mr. Kane. I recognize Mr. Patterson, all you all who are in this transportation arena. I recognize now I'm beginning to recognize just how difficult this area is and how necessary it is. And so I am eternally grateful for you all, for your expertise, for the fact that you have passion for this work. And on top of that, you love your city and your county. So thank you for being excellent in this area.
thank you. Councilmember Williams.
I may have to come back. I mean, this is a lot of information, and we actually live it on a daily. What I'm processing in my mind is the presentation we recently received with GoDurham Better Bus Project, and then how that coincides with the larger project here. Let me possibly come back. I'm still processing my question here.
You're fine, thank you. Councilmember Johnson and then Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. This is a lot of information. It's really good information. There's a lot of pieces in here I'm really excited about. The split between the bus projects and the rail projects seems very reasonable. Thank y'all for figuring that out. I know that was a big question as we were working through this, how much we wanted to prioritize bus spending and rail spending. I think in terms of more things that would be helpful is maybe like some more specifics under each of these categories. And maybe there aren't more, but like the Okay, and under more routes going more places, this is something I was thinking about as we continue to expand the city, and this is kind of just a nature of like, it takes a while to make these plans happen, but over the time that we've been working on this plan, developers have really taken an interest in Southeast Durham, and we're seeing a lot more development happening out there, and in particular, you know, more like townhome developments and denser developments, and it would be great to be able to provide transit to that area. That's probably not something that we were thinking about back in, you know, 2019, when the light rail project fell apart and we moved on to a new, you know, this new scenario. So it's hard to keep up with, like, you know, the trends that are happening. But I think it would be something we should just continue to think about, is like, you know, the areas where we're seeing the most growth, how can we get more bus access out to those communities? And Durham is going to continue to grow, and is probably going to continue to grow in ways that we don't entirely know or expect right now. So having an ongoing process to kind of, you know, make changes to the plans as we move forward, as things change. And there was somewhere in here where y'all mentioned potentially having reporting on a website. I think that would be really great to have an internet presence where people can keep track of projects that are happening, projects that are upcoming. We often get questions, you know, just from residents about what we're doing, you know, and people who want to know more specifics about, you know, how we're, it's not enough for us to say, oh yeah, we're investing all this money in transit, when we can't tell them exactly what it's going to. So having more public resources available for residents to go and just, you know, get a better sense of where the funding is going would be great. This is exciting to see this moving forward. I know it's been a long project. And yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to having these improvements in our community. Thanks y'all for your work.
If I could, just a few of the points you made, if I could respond. I do want to be very clear that the commuter rail project funding is representative of Durham's commitment to a regional project. You know, you received a presentation from Go Triangle recently that outlined the challenges, financial and infrastructure, with that project. It is, you know, the conclusion of the Go Triangle study is that the whole project from West Durham to Wake County is not affordable, right, with our revenue sources. And it also has challenges with getting federal funding for that project. So just want that the report makes it very clear that this is still an unanswered question of how exactly that project moves forward. But we have funding kind of modeled and set aside for that overall need, and hopefully we can all work together and figure out what is an alternative or phased implementation of it. So I want to emphasize that. Also, we're going to be updating this plan every 4 years in coordination with the MPO's plan. So this is an ongoing process. This was a big effort, right? Because it was a reset after the transit plan. Those updates will probably be more tweaks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Good to see you, Ms. Beckman. And thank you for this presentation. I know some of these slides fairly well at this point, and then others are still very overwhelming. But to the point, and I just wanted to raise up some of the questions that Councilmember Johnson made. I really appreciate a lot of the detail in here around like the crosstown, really focusing on areas of the city that, you know, my kids take the bus, but I don't, because it's going to take me a gajillion times longer, and they have the luxury of sitting on a bus for longer than I do. And so I really appreciate that y'all are thinking about, you know, these micro-transit areas. How do we get folks, you know, not everyone wants to come downtown and then back out, which is going to take you an hour. And I appreciate the conversation around every 4 years, because we're looking at Southeast Durham. There's so much development pressure. We're already starting to get development pressure down Old Oxford. And so at some point, we are going to have to think about, you know, okay, Route 9 does go there, but when are we going to run it down further, Old Oxford Road, when we think about the affordable housing communities that are being built around that way, and the other development pressure that's coming. And so I think that communicating to the public really clearly, like, this is the big plan, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do anything for the next, however many decades. Like, this is a flexible process. There's places for input, and there's changes that are going to have to be made, when the time comes. I think will be helpful, and I think a dashboard will also be really helpful. I know that residents really have really appreciated the city sustainability dashboard to show us, show residents where are we going and what are we doing when we think about our energy consumption, and also with the affordable housing implementation with the bond. That's also been a tool that I know residents have really appreciated to show, so that we are, really clear with this is what we're doing with y'all's money. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I actually, you all sort of addressed it. How are we looking at regional rail with the potential or the old opportunity zones now? I guess, are they still there, considered opportunity zones based on light rail, or are we going to change that? And you said every 4 years we're going to update the plan. Will that 4-year incremental assessment, will it allow us to keep up with the development that's happening?
We'll try our best. So the Durham Comprehensive Plan, identifies those transit opportunity areas.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I
should clarify, that's what I was referring to, and how that comprehensive plan ties into with this transit plan.
Yeah. So that kind of, I guess this is my paraphrasing of that effort, but it identifies a lot more of them, like a lot more spread out throughout the city, right? Kind of recognizing that we're shifting more towards bus transit as the emphasis, and that it's not all just along the one alignment like the light rail or commuter rail, right? So it is a much more kind of dispersed way to integrate land use and transit investments throughout Durham. We are creating, we have a map that I think the City County Planning already has it on their website that overlays the transit network and those opportunity areas.
Okay, great.
Make sure that that's linked to our report and shared.
And could you just briefly just say publicly how our transit plan is going to work with neighboring municipalities like Orange County and Wake regarding like resources around bus rapid transit and
Yeah, so Orange County recently adopted their plan. It's still going through the MPO Go Triangle approval process, but the Board of Commissioners adopted it. And they we have matched up the investments on the Route 400, 405 that connect, Durham and Chapel Hill. So we're going to have increased frequency and span of service on those routes. We do not, we have a bus rapid transit study in here, and we will be looking at corridors like the 15501 corridor for what the opportunities may be. Orange County is focused on the NS-BRT, the North-South BRT. It's a Chapel Hill Transit project. I think they're also interested in 15501, but they have less resources, I guess, available at this point to really partner on a big project. Maybe that will change over time, but we are, kind of working together and committed to the increased frequency of service, at least, there. And I think there may be opportunities to partner with NCDOT projects on 15501 to provide facilities that make sure the buses are fast and reliable on the corridor. In terms of Wake County, we are talking with Wake County regularly. I talk to Wake County staff, Campo staff regularly about the whole commuter rail stuff that's going on right now. So if something were to change, I would expect us to continue to cooperate and coordinate on what to do next.
Thank you. Commuter rail would be great, but I so appreciate you saying commuter rail and other things, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah. Go Triangle plans to release their Phase 2 report early next year, go through a public process and decision-making process on how to move forward.
Mayor O'Neill.
I did want to ask you, and it may be Sean, either one, if you all would talk to us a little bit about what's going to happen with Route 9 Bragtown in particular. the plans for that, and the Wellens Village area. And I know they are, if you would just, I would just want to highlight that because those have been two major kind of projects that we've talked about with folk in those areas. And possible timelines, if you know.
Oh, okay, so I'll see if I can remember everything, because it's hard to remember all the details. I know there's a 15-minute service will ultimately be provided on Route 9. That is funded in the plan. I think it's 2026, I want to say. We do have improvements funded this year, actually, to increase the service today, but then, a few years later, it would increase further to 15-minute service. There's also, it's been designated as a transit corridor, a future transit corridor, so same as like Fayetteville Holloway. We have 5 of those in the plan, so Fayetteville Holloway, Route 9, Route 10, and Route 4 are all in the plan. And then for and then we have a transit center. That North Duke Transit Center is also going to be in, the Bragtown area and offer transfer opportunities between services. Microtrans is also, I guess, serving that area as well. So we have a lot of projects. I think the map maybe illustrates that best. There's on Route 3, we have increased service on Route 3 funded in this year, right? Or
Next year, actually, I think it's FY '24.
so in the early years of the plan, we have the Village Transit Center. It's long been in the plan. It's still in the plan for improvement there. And then the Transit Corridor Project. Anything else I'm missing?
Well, the Village Transit Center is already funded. The
Yes, it's
funding's
already funded.
They're ready for it when it's ready to be constructed.
Yeah. So, we, have focused on kind of those high frequency routes to make, those high use routes to improve the service on those routes.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? I do have a few. I appreciate my colleagues for asking many of them. And just specific to the 28 days for feedback, I do want to know if there are other engagement opportunities or planned activities that are going to occur within this 28 days, or if it needs to be limited to 28 days, just acknowledging that the way we've been doing community engagement and the community engagement partners we have, as well as NIS within the city, could be helpful in actually making sure that that feedback is received within the 28 days, or if it needed to expand a little bit further. But I don't want to come back in the 28 days and say, oh, we didn't get enough feedback. So I do want to put that up front. And then just acknowledging, I think to my colleague Williams, Councilmember Williams' point, our neighboring municipalities' plans. We also want to make sure we're including conversations with our largest landowners being, Durham Tech, Duke University, North Carolina Central, making sure their plans align. I know that there were many conversations around pedestrian crosswalks. I'm not sure how their bus routing system talks to ours, but it would be good to have that included in our 2040 kind of like loop, and making sure that it's running alongside what we're doing and what they're doing, specifically for North Carolina Central, because their bus services is kind of like in a circle, but if there were to, anyway. And then on the regional side, I had a question about, hold on. It's freezing on me. On the regional side, just specifically having conversations with the COG, and some of that conversation around developmental pressures is not limited to Durham, and so whatever we're learning, I would love to make sure that we're sharing, and so I don't know what that looks like as well, but that would be helpful. I think those are my main questions. Just want to make sure you have that feedback up front. And then on the crosstown, the micro, even the paratransit improvements, all of those would be really helpful to have timelines on, because I do know the prioritization is helpful. It's the first step, but it doesn't necessarily say that 23%, I don't know what's in it. And so what's happening there, when it's happening, to Councilmember Johnson's point, it's specifics, because I think we've been talking about it for a number of years, and it's the way that light rail kind of blew up. Folks are really paying attention, and so there's a lot more people engaged and a lot more opinions engaged, and so just knowing more information is helpful in that. And I think those are my main points and questions.
Okay. So we've done 3 rounds of public engagement through this that utilized kind of the equitable engagement blueprint, including one last summer where we released a recommended plan and, sought feedback through a survey using community partners and all that.
Just specific to since it's come from Durham County, the recommendations that have been approved, because that was last summer. I'm assuming that Durham County's approvals were in the last couple of months.
The plan hasn't been approved by anyone yet. It's coming in January, February. But we put together a recommended plan scenario and presented that to the public. It was very similar to this. Like the feedback that we got was generally very consistent with all the feedback we had received earlier that informed that. And so we only made some small tweaks really between this summer and this plan. The intensive engagement effort was really done last summer for this plan. This 28-day public comment period is more of the final steps. And it's hard for us to make major changes at this point. We have this big model that models all of these, it's complex, multiple tabs, right? We make a change, we kind of have to rejigger things. So, we don't intend to, we're hopefully not at a point where we have to make big changes, and that previous public engagement, kind of justifies these recommendations. So this is, on the spectrum of public engagement, this is more of the traditional step. We did the more intensive community-based work earlier to inform these recommendations. And including in that, Eilran and I have met with many of the stakeholders like NC Central, Duke, throughout the development of this process, talked to them about the plan, got their feedback. The COG, John Hodges-Koppel was a major part of our transit team. He's since retired, but he was a big element of what got us to this point. So there was a lot of coordination with the COG in terms of the land use forecasting and stuff that they do to inform this plan. And the report includes those kind of detailed timelines. There's big tables of projects that have a lot of that information in there.
Thank you. Just another additional thing, and just acknowledging that as this moves forward, there are consultants and other kind of contract obligations that will be made. I do want to note, in the previous round of questions, there was an MWBE, at least it was noted what the MWBE kind of participation was in this, and I don't see it in this presentation, and I don't see a point, but I'm hoping that is being tracked.
Yeah, we are tracking that. I mean, this contract is through the city, actually, the way it works, it's not a Durham County contract, it's actually a city contract. And I'm sure we have those statistics and could report them back.
I would hope that it would be included in your presentations going forward, too. And then Councilmember Williams had a question.
Yeah, excuse me. And I hate to catch you all off guard, and I don't know who I should ask this to, whether it's city or county colleagues, but what would it take, or let me ask it this way, have you heard any residents say that they would like transportation that would take them to some of our assets, such as Museum of Life and Science, and I think we have some others like Carolina Theater, DPAC. They have buses to go by, but Museum of Life and Science is one of them. And I'm asking it this way because I believe that those are community assets that have regional appeal.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. So the microtransit zone does include the Museum of Life and Science. If the version of the map that's in your presentation does not show that, but I have a new version that needs to replace that. So just, you caught that. It's a small detail, but that is now included in the North Durham microtransit zone. We've actually been talking through email about issuing a press release to make sure that that's better known, that we're announcing this new service that's available and making sure that everyone knows all of the resources that can be accessed through those new services. Because yes, the Museum of Life and Science is one, north and east libraries, which are hard to reach with public transit, are in those zones now. And then, a variety of like shopping centers, several Durham public schools that aren't currently connected to the transit network are now added. So there's a lot of destinations that are able to be added through those microtransit zones.
You all are so awesome. Thank you so much. And as I stated earlier, I'm going to ask my colleagues to jump on board and support state support, financial support for infrastructure. I hope that the county would, in some of your legislative requests, that we sort of identify that policy that will be highlighted soon, that we look at ways of getting more state involvement around infrastructure. Thank you.
Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I just have a real quick question. So right now, both Northern and Riverside are served by the same bus, if I'm not mistaken, bus line. And so I'm just curious with the new Northern that's going to be a lot closer in city limits, are we thinking about, and I'm going to own it, my kids go to Riverside. I see those kids walking down the street like with no sidewalk and not a great bus stop, and it freaks me out every single time I see it. Just wondering what we're thinking about with teasing out those two or figuring out, because I know we're doing a lot of work in North Durham, and supposedly the new DSA is also going to be in North Durham, so just curious.
We have a lot of funding for increased operations on Route 9 and the new crosstown route. And in the bus plan that follows this, we're going to be looking closely at like the best way to actually do the route, like where the bus will go. Does it make sense to, have it be the same as it is today, or would it be more efficient to run the service differently? Maybe, those types of details are what comes next in that bus plan. Right?
Thank you. I'm sure I'll have opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And I do believe that about wraps us up. And I will turn it over to Councilmember Caballero.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for those who just presented. And I think next up is Director Young with Planning.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to get this started for us. Oops. Let me find my presentation real quick. All right. So I am Sarah Young, Director of the City County Planning Department. I have with me a few colleagues here this afternoon. Ryan Eves, who is the Stormwater and Erosion Control Manager for Durham County, as well as Jody Morton, our City Fire Marshal, and they will be helping me co-present this afternoon. This presentation was one that was asked for, commissioned, if you will, by the Board of County Commissioners. It is one that we are sharing with you all at your request. It's also been shared with the Joint City County Planning Committee. So that's a little bit of caveat is why you'll see some of the wording is obviously aimed at the original board, but we're sharing it. We've only changed to update the presentation to meet city standards. Otherwise, the content is identical, okay? All right, so we have heard a lot of concerns about the impacts of development, particularly in Southeast Durham. I'm sharing with you some photos that you all have, I'm sure, seen many times from different sites, concerns from the community about impacts on water quality, about deforestation, grading in general, and the negative things that come with that. And so we've had a lot of conversations at this body when hearing cases, county commissioners at Joint City County, about how we can, in light of these concerns, as development happens, try and improve some of these conditions. And that was the impetus behind this. Durham County acknowledging, the Board of Commissioners acknowledging that they don't have a role in annexation cases, but they might be able to provide some assistance and help address some of these impacts anyway through joint efforts, through some of the programs that they run on the county side. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those. One thing that's, I think, important to take note of is we have had really an unprecedented level of development in Southeast Durham over the past number of years. You can see the numbers here. And recently someone compared this to approximately 2 decades ago when South Point Mall was being built, and there was a lot of development there. There was a lot of development. It happened much more gradually over a longer period of time, was not as concentrated as what we've seen here in Southeast Durham. I haven't had a chance to run real numbers to compare, but anecdotally, just looking through the approvals, they were spread out over a much longer period of time. We still had some concerns back then from folks about impacts, but not to the extent that we're seeing them now. So I think that's representative of just the high pace, the unusually high pace of development that we're experiencing.
Good afternoon, members of the council. Again, I'm Ryan Eves. I'm with the County Engineering and Environmental Services Department. I'm the division manager for Stormwater and Erosion Control, and my division issues land disturbance permits for the projects that we're talking about. This map that you're seeing now is really a graphical representation of kind of what Sarah's talking about. This is the Lick Creek watershed. The blue areas are all projects that are currently under land disturbance permits. There are well over 600 acres currently permitted, with a couple more recently permitted. There's a lot going on here because there's a lot going on in that part of the county. This has all the information, a lot of different information, including the wells in the area, the pump station that was fairly recently completed, the other sewer extensions in the area, just to show you a kind of a graphical representation of all that's going on in this area of the county that we're talking about. So obviously one of the big things that we've heard about is water quality. Fortunately, City Stormwater, and I don't want to speak too much for them, but they have provided us some information for this report. They've been monitoring streams across the county, I'm sure you well know, since the early 2000s. They do have 2 monitoring stations in this watershed, and you can see here just some of the information from their studies of those monitoring stations. Of particular interest, turbidity is something that has been a concern that you're hearing about. One of the reasons we see that tomato soup, as some of the neighbors have talked about. You can see in Lick Creek in 2020, they noticed moderate to high turbidity. Rocky Branch Creek, it was actually fairly low. But you'll just see here kind of what they've looked at. Additionally, they provided a memo about development and turbidity in particular, and they noted that the standard for turbidity is regularly exceeded in a number of Durham County streams, including Lick Creek, and that this level, the standard, was exceeded previous to recent development. One thing we talk a lot about are the soils in this part of the county and across a lot of the county. These Triassic soils are very fine clay particles, and they will stay suspended for days at a time. And as well, another note in this memo is that in a study including Lick Creek of streams across the county, they noted elevated turbidity even during low flows, so outside of rain events, as a result of in-stream conditions found in the soils common to Durham.
So now we're going to talk about some potential strategies from various departments and agencies that might help. And I'm going to start off with some short-term planning strategies that we've already implemented. One, again, this was a request of the county commissioners. They know that they don't have a role in the annexation process, but wanted to find a way to know what cases were coming down the pike and potentially provide input. So what we did is we agreed to restore a prior practice from years ago where we give summaries of the new cases at the Joint City County Planning Committee. And that's actually emailed to both City Council and County Commissioners in their entirety, regardless of whether or not they serve on the JCCPC. That gives them a chance just to know what's in the hopper. And it also gives them the opportunity then, if they so choose, to provide the council their comments for your public hearings. And so that is the extent of their involvement. They just wanted to have an opportunity to be more informed and, if they so choose, participate in your public hearing process. The second thing that we've already implemented is, staff works a lot with applicants. They come in for pre-submittals before they even submit a rezoning request or an annexation request, and we do a lot of coaching them through the process. We always make them aware of the concerns with development, and so you have seen proffers. These are voluntary commitments on development plans that have been made by developers. There's some examples here, but we're seeing more and more of these on development plans, as you all well know. In terms of, this is labeled long-term, it's really more of a medium-term because it's almost upon us now. Staff's been working on a text amendment to address concerns about mass grading and tree preservation loss. And so we have presented a draft amendment to the JCCPC just on the 30th of November. It's going to be moving forward, hopefully, to Planning Commission. We're aiming for January. It's pretty aggressive, but we're trying. It is kind of a sophisticated amendment in that it's not just a straight looking at mass grading and limiting how much you can mass grade. It's requiring phasing of projects. It's tying those phases, giving the development community flexibility to size those phases in a way that makes sense with their project. But depending on the size of the phase, there's a differing level, a sliding scale, if you will, of tree preservation or replacement tree coverage. So we are working on some examples as we move forward into a public engagement phase for that text amendment to illustrate how this will work for the community.
So in addition to the planning strategies, we have some strategies associated with our erosion control program and their requirements. In the short term, we've been working with the sites of concern out in the Lake Creek watershed to implement some additional measures on their site, including ground cover, the use of flocculants, outlet augmentations, stream crossing installations. Additionally, we've increased inspections. We have over 280 active permits across the site, and we're inspecting those with only three and a half staff time. The Board of Commissioners approved an additional erosion control technician to continue adding to our boots on the ground and inspections with the FY23 budget, and he started in the middle of October, and so we've been able to add staff in that capacity. Just some examples really quick of the kinds of things we're talking about when we've been working with these sites. This is a site really at the top of the watershed. It's called Tredenham. You can see here in June, they had a relatively simple silt fence outlet with, which is pretty typical of what we see on sites across the county where they have gravel in front of mesh netting along their silt fence. We worked with them to really beef that up. You can see we added multiple layers of gravel. More importantly, probably for retaining this sediment on site is getting ground cover established. We'd love to see that green on these active sites. So that's just one example of where we worked with these sites and where they were willing to take additional steps to increase the measures on site. Another example is a site across Doc Nichols Road, the Pelican property. You can see here, this was a stream crossing that was installed on that property. You can see that one of our staff was there throughout most of the process of installation. You can see the water here kind of coming through the pipe. It's turbid, but it's not quite that red color that we're seeing. And so because they were able to get better ground cover established, do this in a better manner, we were able to reduce some of that turbidity on the site. some long-term and similar to the ones Sarah talked about with planning, more medium-term and really upon us. Things we're doing are looking to amend the erosion control ordinance in the UDO. Some of those proposed amendments include adding a double row of silt fence in sensitive areas. This is something we already recommend when we're doing our plans reviews and don't really see a lot of pushback. Most developments are willing to go ahead and add that second row of silt fence, particularly along buffered areas. The Triassic soils that I talked about earlier, these really fine clay particles, they're not as responsive to our current erosion control measures, so we're adding some additional Triassic soil specific requirements, including larger sediment basins and slower dewatering times, stricter ground cover requirements, and then flocculants. We also are looking at adding an additional enforcement measure and stop work orders. And we've discussed some ag site exemptions, but we're pausing on those a little bit. Just a quick note about the process for any of our amendments to the erosion control requirements in our ordinance. Because we receive our local program delegation from the Sedimentation Control Commission, we have to go through them before we can formally adopt anything on our end. We go to them before an informal review, which was done at their November 15th meeting. They've basically given their approval for what we're proposing to do. We come back, we adopt them locally, both the city and the county and the UDO, and then we go back to them for formal approval, and then we can kind of implement. That's just the process that we go through for those amendments in erosion control. Fortunately, we've started that process by going through the informal review process. Another area of concern and another area where the county thought we could assist in this capacity is through our environmental health department. Some short-term options include well water sampling for the homeowners. We know there are approximately 400 wells in the Lake Creek watershed. However, there are some challenges to that. There's fairly limited staffing, which may mean we need to contract that out. Just the sampling alone costs almost $500 a sample. And so this could cost a significant amount of money, as much as $150,000 or more, given inflation and all things. I won't speak for them exactly on those numbers, but additionally, sampling is only for informational purposes. Environmental health has no enforcement capacity. And so really what we would be learning is what is in the water, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to do anything about it. We also have to consider the age and construction of the wells that are in this area. Some of them may be 40 or 50 years old. The construction standards have changed since they were installed. Long term, we obviously can continue any of this monitoring. The state has a guideline that recommends monitoring well water every 2 years. Obviously, again, that's dependent on county funding.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Jody Morton, City Fire Marshal. We've worked on short-term strategies as well. Most importantly, responding to complaints. We were getting 3 to 5 complaints a week. We responded in a timely manner, nights, weekends. We've been able to rectify most issues just with communication. I think it's very important to say, though, about 95% of the complaints we've received have been non-founded. They've been in compliance with all local, federal, state laws. There's often disruptions, a lot of people working from home, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A blast goes off and, they didn't notice the signs outside or they didn't hear the siren. So a lot of times we get a call. We've even gotten calls to 911 that were unfounded as far as an emergency taking place. The blasting companies are required to be insured and bonded, which often makes this a civil matter. We serve often as the mediator and the enforcement agency. In the event that a resident or business alleges they have damages from the blasting, we provide the blasting insurer's information. The complaints have slowed down quite a bit in the last couple of months. As of this morning, we had 7 blasting permits active in the city, and that's not 7 in one particular area, that's throughout the city. Last week we had 10 active blasting permits in the city. They typically blast about twice a day on these sites, anywhere from North Durham out to the hot growth area of southeast Durham, as we're all aware of. We've gone out and met with homeowners associations, we met with residents. We recommended like group text to where we can notify if a blast is going to take place at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. One of the complaints we had recently, a blaster got sick, had to leave the site. They had to blast a little bit later in the day, and that's the resident actually called 911 just because the blast was at 4:30 instead of at 3 p.m. So although these are disruptive to the quality of life, the majority of them have gone off without any problems whatsoever. We did amend our blasting permit process through our city attorney's office back in January of 2019. We have one of the strictest in the state. We consulted with the city of Raleigh, Wake County, Greensboro, Charlotte, and we have language in our blasting permit process about well testing. There have been some concerns that have come to council and city management about wells not being tested. Those wells were tested this past week, and not all the wells that were mentioned here in the presentation, but if blasting took place within 500 feet of the well, those wells have been tested. So we do have some enforcement authority to do that. We have enforcement authority to revoke permits. I've been in this division 26 years. We've only had to revoke permits a couple of times in that 26 years. But basically, see if we can get to the next slide. Long term, one of the things we can do, and we spoke with the city attorney's office this past week, we can even make a local ordinance. We can make our blasting permit process more stringent than what it currently is. Some of it does require code council change through the building code council. The next meeting, and you'll see it on the slides here, was this month. I think those are held quarterly. And we could regulate the blasting companies more so. One of the things we did in this particular case, we found a blasting company, they were blasting 650 feet without blasting mats, which keeps the rock from going airborne, to prevent property damage or, it's a life safety issue. In those particular instances, we put additional restrictions on the blasting company. We require an inspector to be there twice a day. We limit the number of times they can blast to twice a day. And one of the things we talked about long term is possibly having an additional fee put on the blasting company if they drain city resources to where we have to be there more often. Any questions on the fire department's response?
All right, and so just to wrap it up, we have, in terms of next steps, there's a variety of things that we've talked about are already underway. We're trying to coach applicants to put forth their best effort to address these issues proactively. We've connected the county commissioners to you all's public hearing process. We've got a couple of text amendments underway, and the city is going to continue, I believe, to monitor Lick Creek next year, which would have been an off year, but they're going to keep it on the list and continue to monitor it next year as well. In terms of other things that are potentials, we talked about the well water sampling, additional continuing to help educate and connect homeowners with the proper information about blasting permits and recourses there. And so with that, if there are any questions, we're all happy to answer.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams?
Thank you for this information, and thank you for being responsive to community members as well as us trying to answer these questions. As we know, development takes quite a bit of time in this city, in this county, and time is money, but also quality of life matters. So with these additional steps that are in place that I believe, do a great job at addressing the quality of life side of it, what type of impact do you believe it's going to have on the process to from application to actual structure when it comes to development?
Are you referring to the changes, particularly in terms of ordinance changes that might be coming? Okay.
Yes.
So Those will definitely have an impact on how folks design their sites. We are proactively doing engagement with some of our frequent development community members, designers that do a lot of work. They're the names that you see constantly and do the bulk of the applications through our department to make sure they know what's being proposed, make sure they have a chance to provide input and give us real examples. I did some early research with a few of those firms just to make sure that I had a good understanding of the toll that some of these things would take in terms of development. It will require that sites that have not yet gone through the site plan process are designed to meet the new standards whenever they take effect. It will probably, my expectation is that we will probably start to see some more compact, denser development in order to preserve some of this area and limit grading. So I think probably the nature, the character of the development that we're going to see hopefully will change some. In terms of timeline, I don't necessarily think it should impact the timeline for approvals. Designing to the ordinance is designing to the ordinance, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of this and make sure the development community knows what's coming, has a chance for input just like any other member of the community, and is well aware before the regulations take effect.
Okay, great, thank you. And when you say compact, are you meaning like the size of the parcel that may be inserted into the application or something else?
I mean in terms of the actual land disturbance that may happen on a site.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to, actually parcel size, or when people apply for specific parcels of land to develop, that may be a separate question for a separate meeting space. So I'm going to email you offline about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor O'Neill?
Just wanted to say thank you for breaking a lot of this information down. Really appreciate you and your staff. Thank you all.
Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you, and I want to thank you as well. I specifically want to thank the county commissioners and the chair specifically for bringing this issue forward and actually highlighting the matter, because I think it's been coming up in our council meetings for the last few months pretty aggressively. I also just want to say that I had a question regarding the unfounded claims. I think that Fire Marshal Moore mentioned.
Sure. The unfounded.
I just wanted to figure out, so are you saying there was no case where blasting occurred without a permit?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and
How do you track that?
within the last year, that's correct.
Okay. How do you track that?
How do we track it? Through our fire inspection reporting software, which is Streamline.
Fire inspection.
Reporting software is Streamline, where we keep up with all of our records.
Okay. And how would a resident find that type of information?
How can they get that information? Just through the next request system.
Okay.
And we get quite a few of those.
Okay. Thank you. And then I noted you mentioned the building code council changes. Is there any language that you forwarded? Because I think that those are items that should be on our legislative agenda, as well as the county's legislative agenda, and as well as the North Carolina League of Municipalities legislative agenda, so that they understand that they're connected across the state, not just limited to Durham. So it would be helpful to have that language.
Sure. Yeah, right now we're utilizing the 2018 NC Fire Code, which is a small section, and NFPA 495. Those are the two governing code authorities on it. But we're happy to provide any additional information.
Thank you. And I think those were mostly my questions. I just wanted to comment and say to staff that I really appreciate the speed, all of you, and your teams, the speed that you've been moving on this, and just appreciate the figuring out a solution rather than just saying it's just what it is. And I think that's helpful, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a couple questions from Councilmember Johnson, who had to leave early, so I'm going to ask the questions that she would have asked if she'd been here. One, she wanted to know how splitting up the mass grading helps when the same amount of land is graded at the end, the total.
So the way that that helps is limiting how much can be graded at any one time limits how much sediment is going to potentially flow into a water body, right? So even though you may have 100 acres over time in an area that gets graded, if it's being graded a little bit at a time, and those phases are not allowed to overlap, which they are not going to be in the proposal, that should limit the turbidity of the water at any given point. And that is kind of the depth of my knowledge when I cross over into water talk, so I'll defer to Ryan or one of my other colleagues.
So basically the best preventative measure for sediment reaching our streams is ground cover, whether that's temporary during development or it's the permanent ground cover, even, asphalt, parking lots, sidewalks, lawns, et cetera. So the more we can have a site grade, then stabilize, then move to the next, grade, stabilize, move to the next, kind of, in Sarah's example of 100 acres, if it's 20 acres at a time, over, a longer period, the better we can manage the sediment that leaves the site.
Thank you. And then the second question was around the use of flocculants, and then how is it determined that they're safe for the water?
So the Department of Environmental Quality has a list of flocculants that are allowed for usage in this manner. And so one of the requirements in the proposed ordinance amendments is that you use a flocculant from that list.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate that. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you. We got this last week at JCCPC, so I asked all my questions there. I see Councilmember Williams' hand is up.
Yeah, about the mass grading, I appreciate Councilmember's question on that. So I've been told that mass grading or incremental grading impacts the cost of it. And why that, it goes back to the quality of life versus this affordability issue. I don't want us to be in a position to where we're held by a developer. We have a few good ones around here, but we also have some that are ill will. And are we putting ourselves in a situation to where the quote mass grading, if we don't do it, then it's going to be more expensive? And I'm thinking about the other end of this, where housing is going to go up because of the cost of the development. And while I agree that we need to incrementally, do the mass grading for environmental concerns, I do want to know how that financially may impact, or is that just a scapegoat that someone may be identifying?
So that's an excellent question. So first of all, mass grading is defined in the ordinance as grading of 4 or more acres. Once you pass that threshold, it's considered mass grading. So mass grading is a huge spectrum. I think what we're proposing in the ordinance is to limit grading to reasonable phases, right? I did do a little bit of research with some of our design community members as to what those impacts might be if they were to, and we're not talking lot by lot site grading like you've had some folks come and propose to you all. That would absolutely be cost prohibitive. However, grading in phases means you're going to have to deploy land moving equipment multiple times during a project as opposed to once at the beginning. You're going to have to lay out infrastructure, several times as opposed to all at once at the beginning. And those multiple deployments do add cost. It can be, per lot, somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. That sounds like a lot. I will say that every requirement in our ordinance adds cost to a development. Every hurdle, every standard that we put in place to try and provide some good community outcome adds cost to a development, right? And so I think the thing to take into account is, the housing prices that we're seeing today. A lot of, I drive through these areas, starting from the 400s. And now I'm starting to see townhouses from the 400s, which is unbelievable to me. When you're adding, $15,000, $20,000 to that, I think we can all say that $400,000 wasn't really affordable to begin with. I also know that from the fill in the blank price, that folks market for their projects, consumers, they will put on that whatever they want in terms of their comfort level for interior finishes. It's not unusual for a prospective homeowner to spend between another $50,000 to $100,000 on top of that in options. You know, choosing a nicer lot with a better view, upgrading carpet, et cetera, you know, whatever. So it will impact the cost of housing some, yes.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted to just have stated out loud. I'm not dampering on anyone's, ability to make money, but I did want it to be stated publicly that, the more things that we impose for the sake of, environmental or quality of life, which is some decisions that we have to make sometimes. On the back end, we have to check ourselves when we start talking about affordable housing as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman?
Thank you, and I appreciate Councilmember Williams' question. And it's important that we acknowledge that the cost will be there and that it can increase for housing. But I do think it's also very real that there's a cost long-term when you don't have water. And so it's important. I did want to track back to the phases again. I wasn't going to leave it alone, but since we're in this space, I do want to just say that I think it would be helpful if the phases were decreased from 50 to 35, and one specific reasoning is just acknowledging that those are usually the most sensitive areas that we're even having that conversation around the phasing as we're moving forward. So even if it was limited to the areas that were sensitive, or limited to projects where they had multiple sensitive areas like this, like I'm trying to think of a recent case where you've got like 4 or 5 stream like arms going through a project, it might be helpful that way so that you're not, because 50 acres is still a lot, especially when there are stream crossings that are being developed over. But I do want you to address that and make sure that it's stated.
Sure, and I know some of your colleagues may not have seen the amendment and the proposal, so I'm going to explain a little bit just for the sake of providing a complete answer. The kind of sophisticated system that correlates tree preservation with how much you grade, what we're saying is you cannot have a phase that's greater than 50 acres. So that's like a maximum cap. Then we have a tiered system of if you grade, up to 20 acres, you have to provide this amount of tree preservation. I'm going to say it's 20%. I don't remember, but I think it's something like that, right? And then it moves up from the 20 acres. There's like another threshold, like 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. If you are at the maximum, you're grading the 50 acres, you're going to have the highest level of tree preservation. It's something like, I think, 40%. It doubles the amount of tree preservation that you are now required to keep. When you subtract that 40% out, you're really only going to be left with, 30 acres or so out of that 50. That still doesn't take into account, and this is where staff is going to do a more holistic example as we move into the public phase, is that doesn't take into account the fact that you still have to have buffers. You still may have streams and other things that require buffers that are going to eat up more of that. So out of that 50 acres, you realistically may be down into the 20s. I am concerned that if we ratchet that down too far, it will really make it cost prohibitive and difficult for developers to develop. I also think that, we've said it for years, all the easy land is gone, right, to develop, right? All we have left in terms of large tracts, as you can see in Southeast Durham, there's a lot of streams, a lot of environmental features, and so giving folks that flexibility so that they can, as they have, a piece of land that maybe is bifurcated by several water features, that they can say, oh, this little V here, that's 44 acres, it makes sense to do that one. This one by itself is really only 13 acres. I need to do that one by itself because I can mobilize and make sense, of my project. So I just offer that as a bit of what staff has been thinking about behind the scenes.
Thank you, and I think that's helpful because it helps to unpack the reason why the phasing is important, because there is a benefit in making sure that ground cover is in place to prevent all of the Triassic soils, which I noticed that map was not on there, which is most of Durham County, from being all moved at the same time. And so I really want to say that this has been it's oddly one of the best policy wins that I've seen since I've been on council, and I am really excited that this is moving forward, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna pass it back to you, Mayor O'Neill.
Thank you all. Thank you all for, of course, your help to my colleagues and making sure that we have an efficiently running process. I think we're going to continue this unless I see nods otherwise in terms of the sharing of responsibilities. All right. So we're now at our boards and commissions, and I will turn our attention to our clerk.
Thank you very much, Mayor O'Neill. The council appointed nominations for today's work session are the following: the Durham Planning Commission, Raymond Trapp. The Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority mayoral appointment has been requested by the mayor to be returned to the administration. The Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority appointment, the separate appointment is for Tammy E. Hall. And then finally, the Human Relations Commission in the category representing Caucasian non-Hispanic person is Ann Sakawi Hemstreet. And that's the end of the report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. Now we'll turn to our city manager at this particular time to give us a rundown of our agenda for Monday night at our next council meeting. We'll settle our agenda now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For your upcoming agenda, I have consent items 1 and 2, and items 4 through 15, and then I have GBA public hearings, items 19 through 21. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Now we'll entertain a motion to settle the agenda.
Move. Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilman Williams and Councilwoman Caballero, but we'll call it the Council Williams. I heard his voice a little loud on this end. It's been seconded by Councilwoman Freeman. All those in favor, if you will sign by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. All right, are there any other items to come before our council today?
Just one.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to bring Councilmember Dr. Monique Hosley-Hyman's proposal forward and just make sure that we have support from council around the National Mentoring Month resolution and event planning so that we are all on one page. And I want to make sure that that I'm getting this right from the city clerk. Do you just need a thumbs up or do you need okay.
There was some discussion about the cost of the event and where the funding would come from. And I was requesting council be aware of this because had requested that contingency funds be used. And so I would like everyone to be on the same page on the request.
Thank you.
You mean out of the discretionary funds?
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, I'm going to, there are a few things I needed to determine before I realize, how much I have left in mind. So.
Not yours.
No, this is from the shared account of all of council. We used part of the funds for the deep dive with Mamie
that's
Bledsoe.
fine.
Yes,
Oh, no,
that other
that's fine.
fund.
I'm supportive. I mean, I was going to be supportive either way, but I just needed to know.
Yes.
Yes, so just to clarify, it's the contingency fund for the office of the city council and the mayor.
Yes.
And those funds are available for, just things that pop up that we didn't anticipate. And so the city clerk just wanted to make sure that we were on board with Dr. Hyman moving forward with this project.
Thumbs?
I have a thumbs up.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Mayor, there was one other, at the last meeting, I proposed to my colleagues, that we have a convening of the Planning Commission and the City Council. Majority of the council has informally agreed to that. So, Madam Clerk, I will get with you to start coordinating calendars to set that up with the commissioners as well as us. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
I think that's an excellent idea, so we're looking at the possibility of a special meeting with them, so all 7 of us can be in person together with them. And Councilman Williams, since he brought the idea, he has to carry it forth, so he will be the coordinator of this. Anything else to claim our attention, everybody? All right, we are now in adjournment at 3:43 on December 8th, 2022.
Moore County has power back.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.